Hi guys, welcome back to Quality Shot Boxing. I'm Ali, and in today's video we'll be talking about past boxing fights that happened perhaps just a little too late. But before we get into the crux of the video, guys, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe down below. It really helps us with creating more enjoyable content for you all. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. I mean, quite possibly the most famous fight, especially from a commercial and financial perspective in terms of viewership and PVPs, so pay-per-view sold, that happened perhaps a little too late. And one of the most controversial fights, especially during the build-up, has to be the Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao fight that took place in 2015. I mean, this was a fight that was many years too late. Both of them were world multiple world champions at that time, and I mean, it should have been made from 2012, even slightly beforehand, when they were still during the peak of their game. Some people believe that Mayweather was in his prime in terms of his what he's been come to known as through his defensive abilities, and maybe he was hitting his prime during that time that they fought. Many felt that although Pacquiao was still dominating, absolutely beasting the divisions that he was fighting, mainly the welterweight division, it was perhaps when he fought Mayweather, you could say during a downhill side, after he reached his peak, went slightly downhill. But I mean, he was still nevertheless still at both of them were competing at a very high level. I mean, obviously we have the conflicting broadcaster rights. I mean, Mayweather was previously with, I believe it was Showtime, and who were Pacquiao's promoters. So obviously you had that history, that rivalry as well coming into it. And even when the fight was made, we could see Bob Arum turn around to Mayweather and say, "Hey Floyd, have you missed me?" Added more spice to it. Don't get me wrong, it absolutely smashed the PPVs, and it made so much from a monetary perspective. It made so much sense, and I can understand why both camps were smart to keep the fight, the hype, tension carrying on worldwide over many years, close to perhaps 10 years or near enough 10 years. Saying, are they going to fight? Are they going to fight? He's ducking. No, he's ducking. Too much hype and attention. So, too much talk, too much hype, too much attention, too much talk surrounding both fighters. Yet both of them were still competing at the highest level, which, as frustrating as it is for us fans who just want to see the sport, want to see the fight happening, seeing it delayed in such a way generated more hype. Don't get me wrong, I think the fight at the end didn't live up to its hype, in that there weren't as many fireworks or explosions or moments that made you think, oh my god, this is a crazy fight, this is a classic fight. I don't think it was a classic fight per se, but that's just the nature of the sport, the nature of the sweet science that we all love dearly. Another fight that I believe happened a little too late was the Tyson Holyfield fight. I mean, the infamous fights where he bit his ears, I think, twice. They happened in the late 90s, 97 sort of onwards. I personally think, I'm of the view that, I mean, Holyfield was active since 1984, and even before that, during the early 90s, 92, and even before that, he was fighting some soon to be, some elite level fighters at that time. Some of the biggest names in boxing, at the heavyweight boxing, especially at that time. And yes, Tyson did go to prison, and since his prison, his career went downhill. But I believe that had they fought, pre-prison Mike Tyson, the outcome could have been very, very, very different. It would have been a lot more exciting, a lot more entertaining, a lot more, explosive from a boxing and technical standpoint. Obviously, I don't think that would have. It was exciting and explosive nonetheless. Obviously, with the infamous ear biting incident, but I still think that could have been turned from the infamous incident to a very famous incident where it would have been just just blows, power blows. Tyson really going for the knockout. In the same aggressive, animalistic vigor that he was doing so beforehand, when he was knocking people out left, right, and center, when he became the world champion at the age of 20. But it happened a little too late. Tyson, after he went to, I mean, beforehand, he got caught up in that lifestyle. Afterwards, he met, he got caught up further, with Don King saga and all the whole Robin Givens and all the drug scandals. And that, I believe, caused Tyson to drop down. Not just, I mean, don't get me wrong, even when they fought, Tyson was still a feared name. He started to develop the baddest man on the planet sort of persona during that time. I mean, even beforehand, but that started to come out more and more. People would be afraid of him even more so after that, because he came out with still such aggressiveness, with such an aggressive tone and manner and personality. And despite that, I still think that his boxing ability and his intimidation from a boxing perspective went downhill. And when you fight someone like Holyfield, who's known as a true and genuine warrior, Holyfield wasn't afraid of Tyson. In my opinion, Holyfield was not afraid of Tyson when they fought. I reckon, as controversial as this may sound, I firmly believe, in fact, that had Holyfield fought Tyson, during his peak, the outcome would have been different. And I think Holyfield, he still would have gone for it. He still would have gone for the challenge. But I do think he would have been more intimidated, or a hell of a lot more intimidated than he possibly could have been during the two fights. Which leads me on to my next fight, the Mike Tyson Lennox Lewis fight that happened, I think, in the early 2000s, 2003 perhaps, early 2000s. I mean, still infamous incident with the Tyson in the press conference we had when he went on his crazy viral rant. Again, I think that at that point Tyson was still a huge name, but nevertheless, he started to just go downhill and downhill and downhill in terms of his ability as a boxer. Because that Tyson, and I'm off the camp, I'm off the opinion that when people say, "Oh, the Tyson that fought Lewis wasn't the peak Tyson," I agree wholeheartedly. That Tyson at his peak was an absolute animal. He was destroying people left, right, and center in a way that hasn't been replicated, in my opinion. Like, for him to drop in such a way, granted, it was still an entertaining fight. Do not get me wrong. Lots of craziness that happened beforehand, during the fight, and afterwards. But I still think it was a little too late. By this point, the Mike Tyson that the whole world got to know in the late 80s and the very early 90s had definitely gone. That aura of invincibility, that intimidating persona that he gave off, had gone. At this point, he just became like a savage animal, and not in a good way in terms of boxing. More of a savage animal in that people started to hate him more and more. People knew that at this point that Tyson could easily be beaten. If you had someone who was brave and not willing to back down, someone who would fight beforehand, the bravest fighters, the biggest fighters at the time would cower, would get absolutely smashed by Tyson. I mean, we saw it with Larry Holmes got Burbick got destroyed, who beat Muhammad Ali. Larry Holmes got destroyed, who beat Muhammad Ali. I mean, we saw, I think it was Michael Spinks, where you could see he was absolutely scared out of his mind. That Tyson, that aura of Mike Tyson had worn off by the time he fought Lennox Lewis. So therefore, just to conclude, the Mike Tyson that fought Lennox Lewis and the Mike Tyson generally within that era, post-prison Tyson, was a fight that was made a little too late. The next fight I will talk about that I believe came a little too late was the Joe Kawasaki, Roy Jones Jr. I mean, both of them are absolute legends of the game. Roy Jones Jr., I mean, need I say any more? I would say it happened 10 years too late. It happened in 2008. I mean, Roy Jones Jr., in my opinion, at that time, he was past his prime. That fight, both of them were at their peak in the late 90s, where Roy Jones Jr. was surrounded by the likes of James Toney and Reggie Johnson. Those were the times of their peak, and they should have fought at that time. For whatever reason, it didn't. And even though Kawasaki won convincingly, I still believe, I reckon that if they had fought in the late 90s, 10 years prior, the outcome could have been, most certainly could have been very, very, very different. Other notable fights include the Joe Louis Marciano fight, where they fought, I believe, in their late 40s or late 30s. I mean, I think it was mid, early, I think it was the mid 40s that they fought, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, guys, if I'm mistaken, do correct me, comment down below. So we always comment down below if you disagree with anything I say. But I think the fight happened, had it happened earlier on, like 10 years, once again, 10 years prior or so, the Joe Louis that the world became accustomed to, where he was dominating these fights, would have put in a much better performance. But I mean, Marcio ended up beating him, getting the right decision, the right outcome, so to speak. Other notable fights include the Larry Holmes Muhammad Ali fight. I mean, very upsetting for all fans of Muhammad Ali, and even Larry Holmes himself, if I'm not mistaken, he did say that he was so upset that he had to beat his hero, because I mean, they were sparring partners beforehand in the gym. So the fight that fight happened in, I think, 1980 or the early 80s. Again, it should have happened perhaps a couple of years prior, between 5 to 10 years prior or so. And I think that in this situation, this is what happens. Fights that end up being very upsetting and very one-sided, when the person who got absolutely beat, who absolutely got absolutely smashed and hammered, would not have definitely allowed that to happen had they fought, early on in their prime, or earlier on, during a period of time in their careers whereby they would have put in a much better performance. In terms of perhaps future, the future of fights that could have happened a little too late. I mean, most recently with the current crop of heavyweight fighters, the Fury Joshua saga has been going on for too long. I mean, it's ongoing now. Fury pulling out every so often, threatening to pull out. And in my opinion, they should have fought the moment that Fury won the heavyweight title off Wilder. I mean, given his rematch, and that's it. Unified the heavyweight division, all 4 belts, never before been done, all 4 heavyweight championship belts, and it would have been the Battle of Britain, absolutely perfect. Say at during Wembley Stadium, an absolute iconic fight. And in my opinion, in terms of the hype and the monetary, that perspective of the fight, would have been one of the most iconic, greatest fights. Well, as for the actual fight itself, who knows? I mean, I think Fury would easily beat Joshua in that respect, but I mean, that's another topic to talk about, during a later video perhaps, or if the fight actually does get made. Another fight that happened a little too late, I would say Joshua Wilder. Don't get me wrong, the fight could still be made, but both their so-called stock levels have dropped. I mean, Joshua has dropped, after losing these 2 fights to Usyk, and his out the ring antics hasn't really helped him. Wilder's gone, he's no longer spoken about, as being the current sort of, I wouldn't say crop, but he doesn't get the same spotlight as he did previously during the Fury saga. I mean, don't get me wrong, even though he lost it, he could still have been active, still have chased the other, elite level fighters. He hasn't. So I think if the fight does get made, it will still be it will be a very good fight, but I think it would have been made a little too late. Another one, perhaps Usyk Wilder. I mean, Usyk is just coming up, and Wilder, he's still up there, but even though he's taken a slight, stock loss, so to speak, and Usyk's coming up, maybe be a very good challenge for Usyk to face him. I mean, it's a complete contrast of styles. One's a very technical, boxing IQ, very boxing savvy fighter in Usyk, and one's just, with all due respect, has got no technique whatsoever, but has got tremendous power. And it'll be interesting to see how the fight goes. I mean, obviously, without a doubt, if Wilder lands one of his trademark haymakers, one of his trademark blows, it could spell a very nasty end to the fight for Usyk. But I mean, we've seen how Usyk has fought with the likes of Derek Chisora and Anthony Joshua, very in and out, very technical. Can he take a hit? Yes. Can he take a body shot? Not so much. Now, if that's something that Wilder could work on, and bring that into the fight, it would make the fight very interesting. But fights like this, these hypothetical situation fights, especially with the current status and calibers of both fighters of Usyk and Wilder, it needs to happen as soon as possible. I mean, obviously, I think Usyk This all depends on the Fury Joshua fight. If the fight does get made, I believe Usyk should chase perhaps the Wilder fight. But again, that fight, if that's the case, it needs to be done as soon as possible. Another, the last fight, the last of the so-called future fights that could happen a little too late, is the Joe Joyce Tyson Fury. I mean, Joe Joyce is rising through the ranks tremendously, and with his recent knockout victory over Joseph Parker, if you guys watch our watch along, you'd see how we interpreted the fight. As in, Joe Joyce is what, like late 30s, 37. Fury is what, 33, 34. I mean, there's not much difference between them, but Fury is entering the twilight of his career, and even though Joe Joyce is still rising up the ranks, he's no spring onion, if that's the correct phrase. He's no longer youth, and so his fights need to happen as soon as possible. I think Joyce is someone who's not afraid to take the most challenging fights. I mean, he's they call him a juggernaut for a very, very, very good reason. But Fury being Fury, is he going to sign? Is he going to pull out? Is his fight with Joshua going to be sorted? And after that, is he going to fight Usyk? And after that, will he be open to fighting another time? Could he fight Joe Joyce? Perhaps. I mean, if he fights just Joshua now, would he retire afterwards? We don't know. Fury is very much on and off. He's like a switch, on and off, on and off. So it's a very, very... We are currently in a very precarious situation in terms of potential mega super fights, especially within the heavyweight division being made. So that's something that only time will tell. And there's nothing more else to say on it, I guess. We just have to wait and see till it happens. But guys, thank you very much for tuning in. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe down below, and hopefully see you in the next video. And oh, by the way, next week we'll be doing a live watch along for the Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. fight. So guys, please tune in, like, comment, subscribe down below. If there's anything I've said that you disagree with, please do comment. Let us know your views and your opinions. And if there's anything I said that you do agree with, perfect. Speak to you soon, guys. Take care.